Well, welcome to Session 5 of Beginning Life Together. This session is titled Sharing Your Life's Mission Every Day. Doug Fields is going to be your teacher, and I can't wait for this session to start. Thanks so much, though, for your willingness to be able to lead in this way. It's a significant ministry you're doing, and you may never know the lasting impact it has on the members of your group. I recently was teaching a seminar, and I was talking about a guy that was in the very first group that I led. And he actually came to Christ at the end of a very short period of time. And I then moved away from my college and went on into working, and he stayed on. They told me that they thought they knew who this guy was. And as they told me, it sure enough was. And they said he is now a pastor of a church. And I was blown away that God could do something that great out of what started so rough. You never know what God's going to do even out of this session in your group. If you're leading, though, for the very first time, I just want to say I'm sorry, because this is the toughest session in the entire study. I'm just kidding. You're going to do fine. And I do want to encourage you, though, if you're brand new at this, to be able to watch the Leadership Lifter for Session 1. It's titled, Leaders Watch This First, because it really sets up some of the basic information that will help you as you lead these groups. Also, I want to encourage you to check out what is called Leadership 101 on pages 77 to 79, and just kind of read through the couple of pages there in your study guide. This session is about evangelism, the E word, an area for most of us and for the members in our groups that is just difficult. It gives us kind of like those sweaty palm moments, or more like the closed arms. It just doesn't seem to manifest itself in most of our lives if we're honest. What I'd like you to do is to show up with your group, with your fears and your hesitancies. For me, I can look back one time where I was in a group, and I came out on the college campus, and I walked out on the patio, and there was a guy that I knew from one of my classes. And he asked me, "Hey, Brett, what were you doing in there?" And I said, "Oh, nothing, just kind of hanging out." I didn't want to admit that I was in there in a Christian group or something. I was ashamed, much like Peter. But I've come to realize that's not uncommon in many cases. Or the other extreme is kind of being a little more abrasive with this. And you can show up in your group and share how maybe you've done one of these two things. But for me, I was a little abrasive in that when I first came to Christ, I ran back to all my high school friends and I said, "You guys got to do this. This is the greatest thing since sliced bread. God is real in my life." And they looked at me like I had fallen off a cliff. To know exactly what God wants you to do and how to do it is difficult. So what I want you to do is to be able to help the people in your group, to get past the fears of seeing how simple and natural it can be to offer the love of Christ to people in an ordinary fashion. A great friend of mine, Doug Fields, is teaching this session. What I'd like you to do now is to watch and to hear what he hopes you will get and your group will learn with this session.
What I would want the leaders to do to make sure this message gets across is I would love for the leaders, especially if they're strong leaders, to be vulnerable and to admit that they're fearful and that evangelism is scary, and we're not now sending people out to, to accost strangers at Walmart, that if the leaders would just, they don't have to be militant, just be careful. Man, this is scary for me, or this is hard to do in the marketplace. And, I've invited a neighbor to church and they said no, and I got a little scared. And just be real vulnerable, because most of the people in the group are going to be scared. Evangelism is scary. So if they could let their guard down, and but then encourage, and even to point out to people, hey, you have a story. You shared your story with me a couple weeks ago about when you came to Christ. What a great story. I would share that story with anybody, to encourage the stories they've already heard within the group.
The most important thing to stress in this session is not that people should share their faith, as crazy as that might sound. This is not about guilt. The important thing is to help your group see Jesus' heart. If you could start with Jesus' heart, it really totally changes people's perspective on this. It's not like a program that the church is doing. This is really why Jesus went like this on the cross. Matthew 9 says a lot about this as Jesus looked out on the crowds, and he felt compassion for them because he said that they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus had a vision that there would be a shepherd for every one of his sheep, and that's really the heart behind his instruction in this week's Bible passage. Once people really hear Jesus' heart, the fear doesn't seem as big of a deal. And being light in the world doesn't seem preaching like to 1,000 people or even to a smaller gathering. It is really about just being with people because Jesus wanted us to be Him for them. We've suggested a couple of very simple, practical ways your group can start being light right now. Even if you don't know the Bible very well, you could get in the game. First way is what we call, question number 9, the top 10 prayer list. This is really not that complex of a concept, but essentially what we want you to do is to think through kind of like the circles of life, the different relational areas of your life. Could be friends or family or people at work or people at your fellowship or other dimensions of your life. That you could just simply say, here's a name of someone that I'd like to begin praying for. Here's a name of somebody that I love and I know, but I dream that they'd come to a closer walk with God. If everybody in your group thinks of 1 or 2 seekers or unbelievers that they know, then together you'd be able to come up with 10 names, maybe even 100 names in some cases. One group told me that they have always kept the list of people that they desire to want to include or to try to bring into the group that they think would benefit from it. The group, this one leader told me, is always over 30 people. And every once in a while they come back to the group because 1 or 2 people kind of champion this list. And they talk about progress. And then they pray about 1 or 2 of them as they just continue to think about what they might do to welcome them into the group or even to their church family. These are 10 people that your group is willing to pray for over the next couple of weeks in your group. And you're going to be the one that keeps it kind of out in the center of the table. If your group continues after section 6, which we really hope that they do, I hope you'll keep praying for those people. Even if your whole family and all your best friends are Christians, there's bound to be somebody that's a neighbor or someone at the gym that you could put on your list. I put a friend named Mike, and I'm dreaming that Mike and I might be able to connect even in this next month because our group is praying for them. It could be someone on a soccer team. It could be someone on you're coaching a baseball team, or it could be somebody that you do a commute to for work, or somebody you're running with maybe. You may be praying for people. Doesn't make that big of a difference. But God uses that seed and that hope brought before Him to be able to keep watering it because it's His dream as well that they would come to know Him. Another thing that you can do with your group is feeling adventurous, as question 10 would lead you. This may seem risky, but I want to challenge you guys to seriously consider what we call kind of a Matthew party, an event like Matthew did to bring all his friends, and then he invited Jesus to come. You could use your group to be able to do this kind of thing. It might be a barbecue or a cul-de-sac party, or it could be a brunch after church where everybody in your group can come and invite 1 or 2 unbelievers. You don't have to talk about Jesus the first time you meet Him. Just let them see how you love one another and how you love on them. Jesus said that unbelievers would know He is who He is by seeing how Christians love one another. And you can be honest that you know each other because you're in a group that studies the Bible together. Let the wheels start turning in their minds. I have to go back in my own journey and remember that the first group that I was in was called a Discovery Bible Study. And I got to the end of it. And the leader asked me, would I be willing to just lead the same study with a few other unconnected people in my church? And I have to say that I was overwhelmed when he first asked me. And I looked at him and I said, dude, you must be desperate. And he said, no, I think you could do it, is what he said. And frankly, in your group, 1, 2, maybe 3 people that could do the same, that could take this study as a result of wanting to express themselves in the community evangelistically, to be able to take what you just have gone through with this DVD and lead a few other friends. It could be 2, 3, 4. It doesn't have to be 20. Why not? Your pastor and your church would be blessed as a result of that. Doug has a few more thoughts to share with you about how to turn this lesson into an incredible session for you and your group.
Yeah, and one thing I'd like to share with your leaders would be to make people feel comfortable when they enter the small group, whether it be in a home, in a church building, at a restaurant, is that, probably I've learned this out of, over 20 years of working with teenagers, is that until somebody is environmentally comfortable, they're not going to be theologically aware. And to make them feel comfortable as they walk in, to be greeted and to be looked in the eyes, and that kind of eye-to-eye, knee-to-knee, I care about you, I'm glad that you're here, because in the small group, the curriculum is pushing them and nudging them and taking them to deeper places, and if they're going to go there, they've got to be cared on and loved on and just felt like this leader wants me to be here, this leader likes me.
One thing we'd like you to prayerfully begin doing is to take a look at the Doing Life Together sampler on the main menu. It'll help you begin to then show to your group, maybe even this week, which session might be an appropriate next step for you. So as we wrap up this one on evangelism, you can see this session on evangelism isn't going to be that hard after all. And if you feel weak in this area, remember that that would be helpful for everyone else to hear. And you're in good company, because the Apostle Paul said that he ministered not out of his strength, but out of his weakness, so that people's faith would rest not on his power, but on God's power. The Holy Spirit will go with you in power. All you have to do is be open. Have a great session, and we'll see you next week.